How you going, guys? I'm Josh from Durry's Customs, and this is my 1986 Bronco. So, I'm going to get into what we're going to do with this car. A lot of people know that I picked this up a while back, like 8 months ago, and we had a whole bunch of dramas and shit like that. Car presents well, but we had some issues with it. Since then, I've just decided to send it and basically buy everything we can possibly do to this car. So there's going to be a pretty big build, and I thought I'd kick it off with actually talking about what we're going to do with the front end and why we're doing all this kind of stuff. You'll get information about, I guess the suspension, all the geometries and stuff. We're talking about IFS kind of systems, or TTB, sorry. But basically there's a whole lot to go into this, and everything I'm doing is, something that's unfamiliar in Australia, and also the engine selection is a 6.4 Hemi. Not something super common in these, nor do I even know of one that's been done. So that's a new exciting thing. Especially the gearbox, everything like that. Everything we're doing with this car is pretty full on. So I thought I'd take you on this build and sort of show you a lot of the things that we're going to get done. You can see down here, we've got the desolate stuff. So this is like cross braces, billet assemblies and stuff like that. We've got our TTBs down the bottom here, which I've snatched out of another Bronco. And I've started to plate them up. That's going to suit for the whole revamp of the suspension in the front. You can see currently that we've actually got a lot of that stuff removed, and the chassis is currently wrapped with a paint remover to get that prepped. So this engine here I picked up out of a 300C Chrysler. These are good for about, out of the box, about 470 horsepower. So fair amount gained straight out of the box from a raw engine. 2019, and it is very simple in design. It's basically push-rod engine V8. The electronics are not over the top. There's just a bit of security you got to get rid of. But this assembly here, we'll talk about pricing. So I snagged this for $8,000. I would say that's very cheap. Most people will be around the 12 to 15 grand. But look, if you're like me on Marketplace, I'm a pest, and I will hunt around as hard as I can to get stuff. This assembly is really good because, look, the weight of our Bronco is like 1,800 kilos pretty much. SRT 300C is a lot too. So whatever this is working in those refinements and the natural or the amount that the engine produced factory, if we're not pushing it too much, everything here should be pretty good without having to do all these tremendous upgrades. So look, we talk about the LSs and that. You got to go down the path of building your gearboxes, doing all this kind of shit. Whereas this is sort of out of the box pretty good. And I reckon it's a bit of a sleeper in people not doing this at the moment. It's starting to take off a little bit, but not a great deal just yet. Front assembly, we've got all your condenser unit, oil coolers. The beauty of this oil cooler is built in for trans, so it goes all the way through here on some bulkheads and then goes to the back. Radiator, also already made to suit this engine, awesome. The dimensions of this slip inside the skirt boards of this on the Bronco, which is sweet. Engine itself, we've got this external exhaust manifold section that comes out into a flange. That will go onto these bottom cats, so we pick up the factory cats, and then we'll V-band that onto our exhaust system. Engine itself, not much I want to change on it. Pretty much all I want to do is turn off the variable what do you call it? Well, there's a variable timing thing on the head that basically knocks off 4 cylinders when you're in economy mode. That leads to detrimental damage on these engines. This is a low kilometer engine, so the damage would not be done, but it's something you want to turn off because the inconsistencies of that doing that. What it basically does is fucks up different cylinders and shit, and it also ruins the cam that goes through it, the lobes on it, where your actual rockers go on and everything like that, and your push rods. It can eat that and munch them up. So that's something you want to look into too. If you are buying one of these engines, that is something you want to look at, is cam wear, and also too, how many Ks are on it. Basically what I've been told is that about 120,000 Ks, anything over that, be cautious of the engine you're buying. Not in terms of these can't do more, it's just if any of those things have started to seep in from a bad design. But other than that, you can change all this shit. You can change the head stuff. You can get new heads if you want. Pull all that crap off. Wholly make a full driveline assembly on the front here to get all your final drive belts and everything down to a single timing case section instead of having different mounts and all that stuff. Not cheap, but if you have the money, you can convert this basically down to a very simplified engine. You can also run carby if you want and change this completely. So some ideas there. We go to the back of it, and we've got a ZF 8HP 70. This is a two-wheel drive platform, so we do not have four-wheel drive on the back of this. We will have to do a divorced adapter for this, which we'll touch later on down the track. But the two-wheel drive rear 8HP 70 is one of the strongest ones you can buy before you push to that like higher one, which is a 90, which is not a super common one, and they weigh a lot. So this particular box here is probably the strongest 8HP you'll get in our kind of market on that. And that will have to be adapted and everything like that. It's an electronically controlled gearbox, so it is not done by any form of cable. So that's something to take in consideration. But that sort of gives you an idea of the things that are going to be happening with this build. There is a lot to happen with it, and I will try and be frequent with this and just raw dog on it basically by filming this and just showing you guys what I'm doing with the cars. It's not going to be anything special in these videos anymore. It's just going to be me working and just telling you shit. Chuck in the comments if you want to see stuff in the next videos and answers and questions and shit like that, QAs and stuff, because this stuff is not common in Australia. Nor is this engine conversion a common thing in Australia. It is starting to sneak into the car kind of thing, or car community, but in terms of four-wheel drives, I don't know of a 6.4 Hemi and a different kind of four-wheel drive. So currently the front section of the Bronco is pretty bare. Engine's all out, all that kind of shit. Most of the stuff that's factory, aircon hoses, all that kind of crap are cut. They don't run bulkhead assemblies on these, they just tube through firewall, and I don't want to run that anymore. So we'll go through eventually and actually bulkhead all this shit. Same as the electrical inputs to the cab. This booster here will get changed out to a Hydro Boost from an F250, which is a small hydraulic booster assembly, which goes down small with a resi off the back. Tons more braking capacity and power, and a very small assembly compared to this big diaphragm. Steering will stay the same kind of box setup that comes with this. It's a very overpowered truck power steering box. So no reason to get rid of that. I'll just put some seals through it. As for inside this engine bay now, we need to basically get coilovers in here, and we need to get all the beams back in, and we need to mount the engine. The engine, I don't know if it fits. It is a same kind of footprint as an LS. We had a 430 big block come out of this. So in layman's terms, basically it should fit. Let's put it that way. As for the mounts, I have no idea. None of this shit will work or adapt. So what I'm going to do is probably either chop these mounts flat and see if we can build off them, or just knock them off completely. We will scan the inside of this. We'll scan the engine. We'll make some adapters to go up to an engine mount. The engine mounts that are on this are a vertical load kind of plate like this with a Inconel shielding around to stop for the manifold producing heat into them and delaminating them. So we'll stick with that. It's well and truly a good mount, does its job. I don't want to put, LS unbreakable bush mounts on here and shit like that. I want to run what is factory on that, because when I want a new mount, I go and get 300C Chrysler mounts, put them straight in, all good. There's no reason to change them. The chassis at the moment, I've gone through and pulled off all the bracketry. Most of the brackets on an old F-Truck or Bronco or something like that, they're all pop riveted on, hot formed rivet on, and then they're pretty much forged down flat to hold the brackets on. I went through, grinding the heads of them off, and then just pretty much get a puncher and air chisel and just slam them out. Keep them if you do this. They're not an easy thing to get, and they're probably worth a little bit of money. So I just keep this kind of stuff in the corner outside. But all that has to go. We need a bare chassis to do what I'm going to do. And now we're pretty much at that point. So the paint on this is just a light kind of black with oil mixed through it and shit like that. So what I've gone through is put in some Cam's paint stripper. You could glass blast this or sandblast it if you want. I don't want to take the car all the way out and do that and get all this blasted just as a small bit. It's a bit of a process, so I'll just put some manual hours in and do it the other way. Gone through, lathered this all up with paint stripper last night, and then I've gone through and put some black plastic on. The black plastic lets it produce enough heat and do chemical, reaction of what it needs to do. If you leave it to the ambient air and exposed, it doesn't do its job correctly. And I think that's where people lack with paint stripper. Also, it's a time period. You need to let it actually activate and do its job. You can't just slap it on and then start trying to scratch paint off. It does work sometimes. This is very thin, but majority of the time this kind of stuff here is like an undercoating shit, which is pretty thick. And take in consideration, this is probably not going to get much of it off, to tell you the truth. Once the oil's there, it doesn't seem to react correctly, and it sort of suppresses its, chemical reaction, I guess. So we'll go through and we'll pull all this black plastic off, and I'm basically just going to get into this with different various abrasives. So we're probably going to look at like a strip disc, a wire wheel, and probably a 40 grit on an orbital, and get this section or working area clean. Once we do that, we'll tape it off. Once I'm happy with all that section and we get these mounts flat, we will hit it with U-Pole primer. It's a copper-based primer. And what that does is gives us a nice base to start welding on. Due to the copper impregnation in the paint, we can actually start to weld on that fine. It doesn't bubble or corrode or create porosity. It is an activator for welding, basically. It will help with that. So we'll get that all nice and prepped. Once our brackets and everything are all in, the next paint we will choose is a steelet. Same thing, a weldable paint still, but there's a sealant with impregnated stainless steel in it, which is good for corrosion. That will get hit with black. Once this section is done, then we move to the other section. We do the same thing down there, and we just keep piecing it together. We go about 50, about 50 mil to 100 mil over the last section, clean it all back up, and then we keep continuing. And it basically, through here, we'll do all that. We could, take all the mounts off, disconnect the electrical lift, the whole body up, and just do the whole chassis, which would be awesome, but it adds a lot more to the build. And then when you do that, you start doing like, oh, I should do this and I should do that. Many people know I am the worst person for my own cars because I will go so far into them that they don't get done. And I will admit that I'm bad for it. So this is something I've had to create goals and set benches for, and this is what I'm doing. I'm hitting it, and we're going to hit it in a certain way and get shit done. We can come back later on and do the other stuff. But as long as we leave the area in a good base, it's stuff that we shouldn't have to touch later on, if that makes sense. So anyway, I'm just going to start unwrapping this, and we'll get into pretty much cleaning it all up, and we'll start aligning up some coilover brackets. Midway through cleaning up the chassis, and I thought I'd just give a little stop here, point out like a couple of things I've been using. Bit of a mess on the floor. It's not an easy thing to do on a Bronco, but this particular chassis, as I said, it had all the pop rivets in it, or like hot rivets, whatever you want to call them. And basically, even when you knock the heads off them and everything like that, the way that they're sort of, pressed in there under heat and everything like that, they mushroom. So very hard to get out of a chassis on this. And obviously the rivet itself and the chassis is going to be some form of a high tensile steel, so very hard to drill too. So basically, you can see a bunch of different things I've used on the floor. Straight up, best thing, like if you can get flat edge on it, just use a cutoff wheel and knock the heads off. Easiest thing to get that down. If you can't, grinding wheel is good to start bearing in. I normally come in straight into it, which gives me a keyway, and then I sort of feather it side to side until I get rid of the head, so I'm not doing so much work to get rid of all of it. Now, some of the heads in the middle here, we had to get rid of the pressed in bracket for the, what's it called? One of the beams. So one beam bolts in, the other one presses in. The new section I'm putting in, which lowers down, is all bolt in, so we have to fix the holes up and go from there. Heated it up, cherry red, and then popped it out, so it sort of relieves it a little bit. Very hard to get that one out too. Engine mounts, you can sort of see it was a pretty tremendous bracket. It was this box section and completely closed in. So I've gone through, started slivering that all out. We're getting there, definitely getting there. The chassis is looking cleaner. So like I said, this section from here to there, that's our working area. So we'll get that all prepped and we get that copper primer on there, and then we're happy days. Now, as for the actual brackets, these ones here, look, I decided to go with this because they're strong enough to do what I'm doing, but if you were racing this, I would not recommend this, or I would potentially, I'll see how they go in, but I'd strengthen them. They're drop-down brackets, so as your TTB obviously gets lifted up, your beams shrink in and your angles all change, especially on your camber. So these brackets go in there to basically eliminate that and drop them down. So once the chassis is all nice and clean, we'll mock them up and I will show you what they look like. So now that we've set our base down, you can see everything is pretty much nice and primed. This stuff that we're using here is copper primer by U-Pol. Pretty generic in the industry now for modifications on cars and stuff like that. It's a weld-through primer, copper and all that kind of stuff. So it's got a good adhesion factors, weldability and all that kind of stuff, and also corrosion resistance. So that is what is laid down on this now. And look, I am a firm believer, my working area is covered in it. I don't know what I'm going to do to the chassis. I don't know what I'm going to do later on, preamp things and stuff like that. I think lay it down as much as you can. It's going to do a good job underneath as a base, and also too, you don't have to take brackets off and redo things and stuff like that. So that's why I like to do as much as I do. I do get people that hit me up and say I use too much of it, but this shit's like $30 a can. It's one can to do this whole front chassis. I don't think that's expensive at all. So you're going to get the people that like to do stuff on the cheap. I'm not one of those people. So I use it all. After we do assemble everything, we will move to the next step of paint. The paint I do choose is Steel It. There is many different ones out there now that have, surpassed Steel It. There's Seymour's and Big Black Bear or something, and a whole range of different ones. Alloy Armor. Personally, I keep around the forums and all that stuff for desert racing people and that, and nothing goes past Steel It. I understand it's $90 a can. It's not cheap, but it hasn't let me down yet. It cures in 5 minutes, and it looks great. So I continue to use products that I like. I'm not backed by any of these products. I don't really affiliate with anyone. I like to just do everything on my own bat. So that's an honest opinion on paint selection for myself, and that's what I use on customers' cars too. So now we're at the point where we need to start doing some bracketry fitment. Our lower arms here to pick up our TTBs, basically we are dropping them down 2 inches to correct the camber issues, and that's going to also lengthen the actual wheel track as it sits static. So that's another thing to consider. They do range between that 58 inches of wheel mount surface. So just something to consider on that for front there. The brackets themselves are 1/4 inch or 6 mil, whatever you want to call it. 1/2 inch holes. I've gone through, drilled out the holes accordingly and sized them up. The hardware that comes with it, this one's here, so 1/2 inch. So I'm going to start chucking these in, and pretty much it's just going to be in place for now to get our geometry and all that stuff good. Once we get our coilover tower in, then we'll take everything all out once it's done, and pretty much, if it's all welded and very in its place, we'll go through and steel it the whole thing. But until we get all the brackets in, plates welded on, steering box and all that stuff, and also the engine mounts, it'll probably sit in copper primer for a little bit. So the brackets themselves, pretty easy, really. It's not too much you can stuff up here. Only thing is, I guess, we're going to keep all the bolts going down. And all the hardware they've provided from Desolate is 8.8. 8.8 is a grade of strength in the bolt and tensile. I wouldn't use anything less than 8.8 in suspension. I wanted these holes pretty tight because I don't want slop in a bolt-on bracket, so bear with me on this. But I'll shoot through and bolt these lowers in, and pretty well we'll look at chucking in the coilover towers, and I'll show you a little bit on them, and we'll go from there. I've just knocked in the coil towers, and I thought I'd give you a little peek about sort of how it's taken place, how it's looking, fitment, stuff like that. You can see our beams here. Obviously they're not sitting in any kind of alignment yet until we get our radius arm sorted, but our actual cross brace is sitting pretty damn nice. I did have to knock the brackets off and stuff like that. Obviously it doesn't suit this particular chassis because it's a right-hand delivery Australian Bronco, but close enough, you know what I mean? It's if I was to suggest this to someone, I definitely would, just for the easeability. And I guess one thing to sort of take from this too is, I do run a custom shop, and everything I do is pretty well a one-off kind of thing. But when someone designs something and has a tremendous amount of proven and reliability within the what do you call it, industry, I'll back that. You know, like I'm not going to go and reinvent the wheel. This is exactly how I would make something myself. And, you know, it makes it easy for me considering I do a lot for other customers and stuff like that. So I don't have time for myself to produce this kind of stuff anymore. I could be a bit more selfish, but it is what it is. So this is the assembly. They do run a bit of a smaller tube than what I would like. I would like a little bit more, but I guess we've got the upright in the middle there. So it sort of takes away from that, plus the crossover piece. If you do this, look, you can get away with towers or box section towers down the bottom here. And pretty much if you're going to run something small like a 12-inch coil over maybe, or a 10-inch, you'll get away with it without having a cross brace. As soon as you start creating that leverage factor and run like 14, 16s, definitely need something over the top to distribute that weight across, and also to stop this from actually flexing and twisting the chassis and breaking brackets and causing stress fractures and stuff throughout the welds. Now, I don't know how well this is going to go on with the bolts for the actual cross brace, purely because they are a fine thread. I wish they did coarse thread, because holy shit, it is hard, especially with a loaded up brace section in the middle here once it's all welded. But what my idea is basically to get a ratchet strap and torque these in about 2 degrees. And what that will do is preload it so that once it's actually welded out or anything like that, it will hold near that area. I will get the bolts that come out of this and then put a taper on the end or a chamfer so that it actually starts to run itself in before it picks up a thread and damages the first line of it. But other than that, I'm pretty happy with it. Like I said, we've got to make way for this Hemi to go in, and that's looking promising. I reckon it's going to be all right, and being a low manifold on the top, I think we'll clear this cross brace. Something I didn't really look into. My main concerns is actually the cross brace here in the chassis that picks up the suspension. Just provisions and stuff for oil filters and stuff. I can already see some holes getting cut into this and some bracing tracked on, and that's why it's still sitting in a copper primer. I haven't gone through and painted this yet. So yeah, looking pretty good. I guess next part that we're going to focus on before we do anything else is going to be beams. We've got probably about 50% done on the front beam here. There's a bit on the back of it done. And the behind the back there, that beam there, the auxiliary one off to the left of the driver's side, that's not even touched at all. Tremendous amount of work TIG welding them up, especially trying to reduce undercut and stuff like that. A lot of people TIG weld and like, yeah, look, you can just run quickly past it and that, but unless you're going to get a really juicy weld that's not undercut, which it takes some time and effort, and also too, we don't want to distort these beams. They already struggle with alignment and caster and camber now. Last thing we want to do is start twisting them and also making the diff face leak too, because we're going to start flexing it around that it won't actually mate up correctly. So we've got some radius arms coming too. Now, I've opted for billet radius arms, I know, unlike me, but I really want to make this thing stand out, and as much as it's killing me in terms of the pricing on it, which I will go through and start to talk about that so I can pass it on to people so they understand the cost of what this is if they wanted to venture down this. But basically, we're going to pick up an arm from probably about where that jack stand is all the way to here. It's a juicy arm. I'd say nearly 2 to 2.5 times the factory one, and that's going to really help with the suspension on this. And it's going to drive very nice too. I will be opting for a front sway bar on this. Factory delivered from Australia has a sway bar, so I have no way around that. I need to adhere to the safety of the vehicle, if not more, and that I do need to have that characteristics of a sway bar in the front. So we're looking good. Bit has taken on. Coilovers, the 3.0 internal bypass coilovers are coming pretty soon. They're getting delivered. Bit of a shout out to Josh Hill there. He always helps me with all my shocks and everything like that, anything Fox, stuff like that, rod ends and that. So yeah, jump onto his page if you need any kind of parts or shocks. Great person to deal with too. And as for the back, quickly I'll just sort of show you what we're dealing with. Down here we've got our shocks, so we've got the 4 tubes. They're getting rebuilt, chucking on 700 mil of hosing on that and chucking on the DCS resis, and this would be for the rear. And then we've got Fox hydros that go all the way around. So they'll pick up all of that. Sway bars and shit like that, and there's other stuff throughout. But they're pretty much the shocks we're going to be using. Originally I was using these Foxes here, but they're just too long. And I want to keep this sort of low. I pretty much want to keep 35s and keep this looking like this on the outside. That's my vision. Everyone in America has humongous big fiberglass and bedsides cut out in squares and shit, and this is just massive big open thing for a 40. And look, I fucking froth it, like definitely froth that. But I think, you know, keeping the vision of a retro vehicle, and people look at it and go, oh, looks a bit modified, and then you look underneath it, look in the engine, you're like, what the fuck? Like, there's a bit going on with it. There's a serious character. And I think that's where I want to be with it. So I'm going to try and keep all that and, yeah, keep that kind of look. Well, guys, thanks for letting me harp on this one. I know it's been a while between all the YouTube stuff and everything like that, and I do try and put the effort into it. I just have a tremendous amount on in the background. So I think if we can aim to stick to this raw kind of footage and just talking about it, a bit of here and there, just showing you some stuff, I think that we'll keep it pretty good and just keep it like a vlog. And obviously this is easier for me to just chuck on quickly, edit it and chuck it up. There's not gonna be music and all that kind of stuff. So that is gonna be the beauty of this. I hope it sort of brings in some people interested in this stuff. I'm still gonna switch back to the other stuff I do too. I've got a lot on this year. There's a lot of stuff coming in, so I want to sort of document this shit now and actually start showing people it. The stuff I do is not generic, and I try to keep it pretty, you know, relevant and ramped up to new kind of stuff, and I hope people really do enjoy that. So anyway, that sort of takes us on the first episode of, you know, just sort of setting a good foundation on this vehicle, and we'll get back to starting to, you know, rebuild the hubs, weld out stuff. There'll be some tips on that. And we'll probably look at sort of starting to set geometry on these TTBs. Anyway, guys, thanks for watching. I'll see you next episode.